When I talk about codependency, I'm really talking about love addiction too. You can be a codependent, not be a love addict, but most of the people that I work with usually are codependent and love addicts at the same time. And really what that means is they just have this chronic pain and emptiness if they're not in a relationship. They need to be coupled up. They need to be in love. They're, either addicted to the idea of love. They're addicted to the high of love. Sometimes when we talk about alcoholics and addicts, which is something else that I do talk about, they're always chasing that first high, that first drug, that first, sip of wine or whatever. But codependents, love addicts are always chasing that first high of being in love, of being needed, of being wanted. And it becomes very self-perpetuating. It becomes very obsessive, and the behavior can become really compulsive, just like an addict's behavior can be compulsive. There can be really adverse consequences. You might call a partner excessively when you shouldn't be. You could be sacrificing yourself in all different areas of your life, whether it's financial or values, or just trying to accommodate someone so they don't leave you. You can become really like Snoopy. You can be snooping out, their online stuff, their phones, looking at all their texts. And you're doing this out of this jealousy and this fear that, you might, if you don't have this person in your life, oh no, I'll be alone, I'll be abandoned, I'll be rejected. So it's very self-perpetuating. It's characterized by symptoms that vary on a continuum. So they can range from mild to severe. They can include dependency. Denial is a really big one, like, oh, I really love this person, they're so great, really kind of ignoring the red flags. That often happens when you fall in love with maybe a narcissist or someone who's abusive or even an addict. And you're kind of in love with the idea of love and the illusion of them rather than who they really are. You often have a lot of dysfunctional emotional responses, and you're craving that reward system, of wanting that person to want you, wanting that person to need you, wanting to be needed. And it's an inability to control or abstain from some of these behaviors. So you increasingly spend time thinking about, being with, controlling, even manipulating, just like a drug addict does those things with, craving their drugs. So that's kind of how I see it. I see it sort of as an interpersonal problem in terms of codependency.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad. I always love it when you bring the love addiction into this conversation, because I have a lot of those compulsions as well. And I also love what you said about the reward, us wanting that reward, that those accolades, or that right validation that we're needed and we're valuable. And I think that's such a common thing for so many of us who deal with codependency. So what about trauma? I know that a lot of your work revolves around also helping people through trauma. So what does trauma specifically have to do with codependency? And how does it affect being what you call radically authentic?
Well, when you don't receive what you need as a child, your emotional growth is really going to be stunted. So if you were neglected or abused, or you had emotionally unavailable parents, maybe they were alcoholics or addicts, maybe they set you up as being a little adult because they were, were children themselves, really. So you sort of had to take care of them. Victims of trauma have a real false reality of themselves. They don't even know themselves because they feel so invisible, because the focus really isn't on them. It's on these neglectful parents. So they learn to not trust their emotions. They feel invisible because they can't really access their true feelings because nobody really validated them. Or, you think about a baby and you look in their eyes. I think of my granddaughter, and there's this reciprocal attunement that's happening. But for codependents and love addicts, they don't really get that attunement. So they're sort of in the abyss of like, who am I? They feel invisible. And this is, again, all from this unavailability or neglect. And you learn at an early age that your feelings don't count because you weren't validated. And so then you suddenly become other focused, and you learn to focus on everybody else around you rather than your own needs, which is the foundation of a true self. So you find yourself by knowing yourself, and that's done through this attunement, this resonating with this caregiver. So if you don't have the intimate relationship with yourself, then how can you really be an authentic self? And so then it becomes difficult to have an intimate relationship. So all your relationships become very other focused, which is at the heart of codependency. I remember, I would say, in all these relationships that didn't work out, I talk a lot about this in my book, Love Smacked. oh, they were unavailable. They were emotionally unavailable. They weren't there for me. And then I, realized one day that I was emotionally unavailable to myself. I didn't have a connection to myself. My early trauma, which I'm sure some of your listeners have heard this. I was premature. I was in an incubator. I didn't get that early bonding for the first 2.5 months of my life. So I was always looking outside of myself from that incubator saying, come on, hold me, lift me up, bond with me, hug me, give me attention. So from the get-go, that's how I became a quote, love addict and codependent, and didn't really have what I needed to learn who I was because I was so outside focused. So, they often say in the programs of 12-step meetings, it's an inside job, and it really is. It's not an outside job. So once you are connected to the insides of you and know who you are and can be authentic, suddenly you can connect to other healthy people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting how many of us, if we didn't have that, right, experiences younger where we were validated and all that, we really don't know who we are. And so, yeah, getting into different relationships and, it just kind of piles up over time as far as being authentic. So how does one know if they're codependent? You went through a few characteristics, but how can people know that they're codependent?
I have many things on this list here. So I'll just go through a couple. I think it could go on forever, but I think people will get, they'll have an understanding once I go through this. But again, you come from a dysfunctional home. You don't really get real nurturing from others. You're terrified of abandonment. You'll do anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to feel that pain of being what you consider being, absolutely excruciating, being alone. That was my whole thing. And that's very prevalent with love addicts and codependents. They just cannot be alone. So then you end up settling, which is a huge aspect of codependency and love addiction, is settling for less. That's why you end up attracted to addicts and narcissists, because you'll take the bones, really, the scraps. Almost nothing is too much trouble. Nothing takes too much time. Nothing's too expensive. You'll do anything to help another person. And you're kind of accustomed to lack of love because you didn't get it growing up. So you're always waiting, hoping, trying harder to please. If I only just do it this way, I'll finally get that subconscious feeling of love from my parents. You're really trying to get back what you never got through this new adult relationship, which of course never happens.
AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.